A crime of honor committed by close relatives. A crime of honor is a severe criminal act, typically, but not necessarily, committed against a female family member as punishment for bringing disgrace and dishonor upon the family. The offenses punishable by death at the hands of relatives can vary across different countries and cultures, but often include marital infidelity and apostasy. Each year, according to official statistics, around 5,000 such crimes occur worldwide. However, various women's rights organizations claim this number is at least 4 times underreported. What is most alarming is that often the perpetrators face no punishment and their actions are deemed righteous. Police in countries where such crimes are prevalent simply turn a blind eye to these acts, and although it is claimed that in recent years the penalties for such actions have been intensified, there are no official data to substantiate this. Samia Shahid's case in 2016 shocked the world. She was forcibly married off to a cousin she openly despised and sent to her ancestral homeland. However, she soon broke off this imposed union to marry for love, against her relatives' wishes, and paid the ultimate price for it. Her story drew intense public scrutiny as she was a British citizen of Pakistani descent. Yet she met her tragic end in Pakistan, where the case was quickly suppressed, attempting to frame it as an unfortunate accident. The Shahid family story. Chaudhry Mohammed Shahid and Matiaz Shahid emigrated to the UK in the mid-1980s from a small Pakistani village named Pandori, located in the Jhelum district of Punjab province. They moved to a foreign land in search of a better life to escape the poverty they lived in back home. In November 1987, their eldest daughter, Sami, was born in the English city of Bradford, located in West Yorkshire, and a few years later, her younger sister Mita was born. The head of the family established his own business renting cars, which later focused on renting luxury vehicles, including high-end limousines. As his business prospered, he helped 2 of his brothers and their families also move from Pakistan and settle in the UK. The relatives also opened and successfully developed their businesses. One brother had his own seafood shop chain by the early 2000s, and the other opened a flower delivery and floristry company. Overall, the Shahid family was quite well known and successful in Bradford, being quite wealthy and influential. Sisters Sami and Mita were born and raised in the UK, but their family strictly adhered to the laws and traditions of their ancestral country, so the girls grew up under the influence of a mix of European and Pakistani cultures and customs. The liberal English views and manners starkly contrasted with the strict orders of their ancestors' country. For example, the girls were not allowed to drive a car, and all their contacts and movements were strictly monitored by their father. The elder daughter, Sami, was the apple of Chaudhry Muhammad's eye and was considered daddy's girl. He indulged her in every way, buying her expensive outfits and jewelry, and paid for her education at one of the most prestigious universities. She meticulously cared for her appearance, used cosmetics from well-known brands, visited beauty salons, and spent extravagant amounts of money there. Meanwhile, she worked part-time at a post office, essentially supported by her father who paid for all her whims and desires. Frequently, Sami, without her family knowing, would rent a car and drive herself. She loved driving, felt confident behind the wheel, and did not understand why Pakistani traditions forbade women from doing so. She was headstrong and freedom-loving, but she tried not to upset her parents, doing everything as they said. Shahid had many friends from school and university in England with whom she kept in touch. She was characterized as a bright, kind, and cheerful person. Forced marriage. Despite living a life filled with love and abundance and seemingly having everything she wanted, the woman was deprived of the opportunity to make any decisions independently. She constantly lived with an eye towards her parents' and elder family members' opinions, from whom she needed constant approval for her actions. More than anything, Sami feared upsetting her father, whom she adored. However, numerous prohibitions, fears, and strict orders meant she was never truly honest with her family. In 2012, her parents decided it was time for their eldest daughter to settle down, get married, start her own family, and have children. They insisted that she go to Pakistan and enter into a marriage in accordance with all the rules and cultural traditions. They chose her cousin, Chowdhury Muhammad Shakeel, whom she barely knew, as her groom. It's worth noting that marriages between relatives and arranged marriages are quite common, although not a strict requirement in Sunni Islam, but the tradition is honored to this day. Sami knew that sooner or later her parents would choose a husband for her and present it as a fait accompli, leaving her with no choice in the matter. She was prepared for this, understanding the inevitability of such a marriage, but her father's choice was truly shocking to her. Shakeel was openly distasteful to her, even causing her some repulsion. Additionally, he had recently been released from prison where he served time for ending someone's life over a land dispute. Since childhood, Sami occasionally interacted with Shakeel as if he were a brother, but she could never imagine him as her spouse. Notably, her own parents were also cousins whose marriage was arranged by relatives, but they managed to genuinely fall in love and build a happy family. Her parents believed that their daughter would experience the same fate and that she and Chowdhury would eventually fall in love. Despite her aversion to the groom, Sami could not disobey her father and understood how important this was to her family. However, her mother and younger sister Mita later claimed that no one forced her into the marriage, and given her complex and headstrong character, it would have been impossible to do so physically or morally. She married voluntarily, without any coercion. In early February 2012, the decision about the upcoming wedding was finalized at a family council. The following couple of weeks, her parents and aunt and uncle, future in-laws, took the bride shopping, where she chose everything she liked, and they paid for expensive outfits, jewelry, accessories, cosmetics, and so on. Sami was denied nothing, but it all seemed as if she was being purchased. Likely that was indeed the case. The bride pretended to be caught up in the wedding preparations, but inwardly she felt like a hostage. She already understood that this marriage would not bring her happiness, but would be a real punishment. However, she could only discuss this with her friends, not her family. At home, she needed to appear happy, discuss the details of the upcoming celebration, and prepare for her departure to Pakistan. On February 20th, 2012, the young woman boarded a plane and, while in the cabin, sent a message to a close friend saying she was flying thousands of miles to make the biggest mistake of her life, but she had no choice. Later, she sent several more messages in which she confessed that the mere sight of the groom made her nauseous, and she could not stand to be near him. On February 27th, a lavish wedding was held for Sami and Chowdhury in Pandori, attended by about 1,000 people. The celebration lasted 4 days, and as a wedding gift, her parents presented the newlyweds with their own luxurious 2-story house, located next to their family home in the same province of Pandori. However, the young woman understood that this rich and beautiful house would become a real prison for her, where she would be forced to live with a man she did not love. Return to the United Kingdom. Family life, predictably, did not bring Sami happiness. She still detested her now lawful husband and realized she could neither love this man nor even grow accustomed to him. But 4 months later, in mid-June 2012, the young woman returned to her native Bradford to sort out some issues and help her husband with the immigration documents for obtaining British citizenship. She was supposed to apply for a spousal visa for Shakeel, but she was in no hurry with this, enjoying the illusion of freedom and the opportunity to not see her unloved husband for some time. When Sami finally started processing the documents, she learned that their wedding ceremony, conducted according to all the canons of Sharia, was just a marriage contract between Muslims, but had no legal force in the United Kingdom. To recognize such a marriage, certain measures under European laws were necessary, namely conducting a civil ceremony and obtaining an official document, a marriage certificate. Friends of Sami noticed changes in her character and behavior after returning from Pakistan. The young woman appeared sad, her eyes seemed extinguished. She was no longer the joyful and sociable person she used to be, and she clearly harbored deep resentment towards her parents. Any conversations or mentions of her husband and family life provoked irritation and anger in her. The issue was that Shakeel was very jealous and tormented his wife, even from another country. He constantly called her and could demand at any time that she video chat with him. This was how the man controlled where his wife was, what she was doing, and who was with her. Moreover, this was, in a way, a demonstration of the husband's superiority and his power over the woman. In early August of the same year, during a phone conversation with a close friend, Sami confessed that her nerves were giving out. She was completely drained and no longer wanted to live because she had lost any joy, hope for happiness, and a bright future. She said she detested Chaudhry with all her soul and never wanted to see him again. However, she could not say this to her relatives. They only went around telling everyone about the luxurious wedding they had arranged for their eldest daughter. The very man. In early September, without having resolved the issues with the spousal visa, Sami was forced to return to Pakistan to her unloved husband. She regularly wrote to friends about how miserable she was, how much she hated her marriage, and how she felt trapped with no way out. This continued for several months, but then she began to complain less frequently, and her mood changed. During her next visit to the United Kingdom, it became clear what had caused this change. It turned out that she had met a young man online, Syed Mukhtar Kazim, who, like her, was a British citizen of Pakistani origin. He was born and raised in London but had been working and living in the United Arab Emirates for the last few years. The pair started corresponding and quickly developed romantic feelings. They secretly arranged a meeting, and in October 2013, they saw each other in person for the first time. Sami immediately realized that Syed was the man of her dreams, with whom she wanted to spend the rest of her life. He was kind, caring, attentive, and courted her beautifully. They had a lot in common, but they both understood how dangerous and risky their relationship was. Nevertheless, life only seemed meaningful to the young people when they were together. She openly told her beloved about the situation she was in and said she was ready to end her marriage to start anew with Syed. However, she could not get a divorce through a British court because, according to local law, she was not married at all. Divorce and new marriage. In the spring of 2014, Shahid decided to speak with Shakeel and asked him for a divorce, but he rudely refused, stating that she would belong to him until the end of her days. Then, during another visit to the United Kingdom to her parents, she secretly contacted a local Islamic Sharia Council, reporting that she had been forced into marriage, which was a valid basis for annulling the marriage. She also converted from Sunni to the Shiite branch of Islam, which her new lover belonged to. The cleric contacted the woman's husband to hear his side regarding their marriage, but he again rudely refused to discuss his personal life, stating that he would not give permission for a divorce. After that, the Islamic Sharia Council of the United Kingdom dissolved the marriage, recognizing that Shahid had been coerced into it by family pressure. Sami's family members had no idea that she had divorced her husband in absentia and was preparing to remarry, now to the man she loved. In September 2014, the young woman secretly married her new chosen one. This time, the union had legal force, and the spouses received a certificate of registration of their relationship, confirming its legality. The same cleric who had granted permission to dissolve the bride's previous marriage conducted the Nikah religious ceremony. Only a few close friends of the newlyweds, who were present at their wedding, knew about this event. The couple was truly happy. Sami confessed to her friends that she felt like a princess in a fairy tale and couldn't believe that all this was happening in reality. However, this joyous and happy event was the beginning of a real nightmare: family dispute and escape from the country. When Shakeel demanded that his wife return to Pakistan, she responded that she no longer belonged to him and presented a certificate of her new marriage. This infuriated the man, who immediately called his father-in-law to inform him of the situation, sparking a severe scandal. The family attempted to coerce her to return to her husband with threats, but she refused, which soon led to severe consequences. A few weeks later, Sami was brutally assaulted on the street while shopping with her sister. Notably, her sister was unharmed, but Sami nearly had her legs broken with metal bars. The police took her statement but failed to find the men responsible for the assault, and the case was quickly dismissed. At this time, Syed had to fly to Dubai for work, leaving his wife in the United Kingdom awaiting a visa to follow him. The wait became a real torment for her, filled with endless threats, disputes with relatives, and fear for her life. Moreover, her parents tried to prove that their daughter's divorce from Shakeel was invalid, and even caused a scene with the cleric who had married the lovers. Sami's mother was furious, insulting her daughter and saying that she had disgraced their family and would suffer terrible retribution. In the spring of 2015, Sami finally received her visa and was able to fly to her husband in Dubai. It felt more like an escape, as the young woman feared her family would do everything possible to keep her and forcibly return her to Pakistan. For several months, she kept her passport with friends who also bought her a plane ticket and accompanied her to the airport, a new life. The following year was the happiest in Sami's life. She enjoyed her freedom and the ability to make her own decisions, living with the man she loved, who adored her and was ready to carry her on his hands. Additionally, she could drive a car, something her parents and former husband would never have allowed her to do. In photos posted on social media, Sami was radiantly happy. She blossomed, looked more beautiful, and it was clear she had achieved what she had always dreamed of. Shahid wanted to become a mother as soon as possible, but sadly, this happiness was not meant to be for her. Nonetheless, she and her husband confidently looked to the future, making plans for their lives, unaware that her closest relatives had already condemned her. Immediately after their daughter's departure, her parents filed a missing persons report with the police, which they later wanted to reclassify as an abduction, accusing Kazim of the crime. The Shahid family members started devising a plan to force the young woman to return by any means necessary, considering various options. Threats no longer worked on her, but they could play on her sympathy. A sinister trap. In June 2016, Sami's parents conveyed tragic news. Her aunt, Shakeel's mother, had passed away. Sami was devastated and even considered flying to Pakistan for the funeral, but she was aware of the risks involved. Many family members still hadn't accepted that she had left her unloved husband and remarried. Her actions were viewed as betrayal and disgrace. A week after the aunt's funeral, her mother called again, reporting that her father's health had severely deteriorated. He had diabetes, and his condition had recently become unstable. If he passed away, Sami knew she would never forgive herself if she didn't visit him. Despite her concerns and her husband's attempt to dissuade her, she decided to travel to Pandori. Fearing for her life and safety, she promised her husband to keep in constant contact with him. On July 14, 2016, Shahid arrived in Pakistan and first went to a close friend's house. She left her passport and return ticket to Dubai with her friend, shared her fears, noted her bad premonition, and asked her friend to pray for her safe return to Syed. The following few days passed relatively peacefully. She stayed in touch with her husband and friend, updating them on her movements. She visited her aunt's grave with her family and met with many relatives. She was scheduled to fly back to Dubai on July 21st. However, on July 20th, Sami suddenly stopped making contact. Tragic news. On July 20th, 2016, Chaudhry Mohammed Shahid called the police station to report the tragic death of his daughter. When law enforcement arrived at the house where Sami had lived with her first husband, they found her lifeless body at the bottom of the stairs. Unfortunately, it was too late to help her. There were several visible bruises on her body, which, according to her parents, she sustained from falling down the stairs, and a small amount of pinkish foam was found coming out of her mouth. According to her father, Sami likely had a heart problem, fell, and rolled down the stairs. Since no one was home at the time, she was not assisted promptly and she passed away. When asked about the whereabouts of the deceased's husband, Chaudhry stated that he had gone out on business. The police found no signs of foul play at the scene and did not open a criminal case, leaving the final determination to the forensic experts. An autopsy was conducted on the same day, yet the pathologist found no signs of violence, and the conclusion was that her death was due to natural causes. She was buried within a few hours of her death. Sami's sudden demise was not considered suspicious and raised no questions, except from her grieving husband. When Kazim was informed of his wife's sudden death from a heart attack, he couldn't believe it. Moreover, the press called the young woman's death a voluntary departure from life due to depression over her inability to have children. However, this version was contested by Shahid's relatives, who claimed she lost consciousness on the stairs and broke her neck while falling. Investigation and the grim truth. Syed Mukhtar flew to Pandori on the first available flight and went straight to the police station to report that his wife was deprived of her life by her relatives and former husband. He described the forced marriage and her escape, as well as threats from her family. This information fundamentally changed the case. The authorities recognized it as an honor crime, but the body had already been buried, and the official report stated that Shahid died of natural causes. However, as the deceased was a British citizen, Kazim sought to involve European law enforcement and the media in the investigation. Initially, Sami's father agreed to an interview and tried to portray Syed Mukhtar as an imposter and extortionist. However, after the young man produced their marriage certificate, as well as a hard-won copy of the medical report and post-mortem photos of the deceased, an investigation was initiated. The report noted bruises on the deceased's neck and legs and traces of male seminal fluid on her body, indicating that she had intimate relations shortly before her demise. But with whom, if Shakeel was supposedly not at home that day? Kazim held a press conference, presenting all the evidence he had, including text, voice, and video messages from Sami, in which she repeatedly expressed fear for her life. Suspicions arose that the police had been bribed, and the deceased's father and former husband were immediately detained. It turned out they had no intention of letting the young woman return to Dubai. They forcibly brought her to the house given as a wedding gift, where they searched all her belongings for the passport and ticket, which, as mentioned, she had left with a friend. A furious Shakeel, with his father-in-law's tacit approval, physically subdued the young woman, and after she tried to escape, the men caught up with her on the stairs. While the former husband strangled Sami with her scarf, the father held her legs, leaving her no chance of survival. This account was confessed at the station by the perpetrator himself, although Chaudhry Muhammad denied any involvement in the act against his own daughter. Legal proceedings and the fate of the participants. Besides the father and former husband, the deceased's uncle, who had acquired a forged report before the autopsy, and the commissioner who conducted the initial investigation, were also detained. In court, Shakeel recanted his confession, claiming it was made under duress. He spent just over 2 years behind bars but was released on bail in September 2018. In 2019, the man remarried and again attempted to relocate to the United Kingdom, which was unsuccessful. The father of the deceased was in prison from July to December 2016 and was also released on bail. He passed away in January 2018 at the age of 52 due to exacerbated health problems, never admitting guilt or involvement in his daughter's demise. The deceased's uncle and the commissioner were also released in the fall of 2016 without facing any consequences. Soon after, arrest warrants were issued in Pakistan for Mita and Matiyaz Shahid, but the mother and sister of the deceased promptly returned to Bradford. Mita later gave a substantial interview in which she attempted to discredit Sami and her second husband, blaming them for the downfall of the once happy Shahid family. The angry man walked out of the house, slamming the door hard. He reached the driveway and stopped. He ran his hand through his black, disheveled hair several times. The man was visibly nervous and said something quietly under his breath, then walked briskly back toward the house. He tugged sharply on the doorknob and stepped inside. Picking up a baseball bat that was lying at the entrance, he walked bossily through the house and shouted violently, At his screams, a blonde-haired young woman ran out. As soon as she approached him, he struck her on the head with the bat. The woman fell unconscious, and instantly a pool of blood formed on the floor around her. The enraged, dark-haired man continued to strike the immobilized woman until his fervor subsided. It is hard to imagine, but it happens that in such a paradisiacal place of the planet as New Zealand can happen such bloody tragedies. After all, New Zealand is first of all a picturesque nature with its unique flora and fauna, which creates a comfortable climate for people to live in. People living here have a high standard of living with a measured and calm way of life, where there is no corruption and crime is close to zero. But today our story will disrupt the tranquil life of Oakland and completely change the notion of a happy family. Carmen and Brad met on an ordinary day, which later became a fateful day for the two of them. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987 in South Africa. Her father died when the girl was only 10 years old. Heavily bearing the loss, her family moved to relatives in the town of Whitby in the United Kingdom. But in another country, the long-awaited peace never came, and after a while her family moved back to South Africa. Carmen, who was over 18 years old at the time, decided to stay with her relatives and later moved to live in London. In London, Carmen completed her studies and earned a master's degree in marketing. She had a strong and mischievous personality that attracted people. Carmen was a loyal friend and comrade for many people, but a beautiful life in a large metropolis required a lot of expenses, and the girl had to work hard to ensure a decent standard of living. During the day, Carmen worked in the store as a marketer, and in her spare time she worked part-time in a gentleman's club. Despite her strange choice in the service industry, Carmen was a girl of strict rules and never allowed herself unnecessary and even more so undignified behavior, which was very much appreciated by important clients. It was there that she met an attractive and flamboyant man, Brad Callahan. Bradford James Joseph Callahan was born in New Zealand in April 1978. The boy's parents separated when he was 9 years old. Little Brad stayed with his mother, after which they moved to Australia. In 2001, Brad graduated from university and received an engineering degree in the construction industry. At the invitation of a large construction company, he moved to the UK, where he was offered a position as chief structural engineer for a large business complex. For important negotiations and added status, Brad turned to a gentleman's agency, and his choice fell on the beautiful Carmen. The man was intelligent, tall, black-haired, with bright dark eyes, but he could not afford a real relationship because of too much ambition and busy career. He had no free time for a permanent relationship. After a successful business dinner, Brad was conquered by the open and radiant Carmen. They continued informal communication, which was repeated again and again. After a while, they formed a good friendship, which later grew into love. The candy bouquet period flew by very quickly, and the lovers began to live together. Their life together was based on trust and care. They sincerely supported each other and looked absolutely happy. After a while, Carmen became pregnant, and Brad decided that the best solution for them would be to return to New Zealand, to a country with clean air and the measured course of life. They returned to Auckland. In March 2005, Carmen and Brad had their son Jack. Jack brought more joy and happiness into their lives. From the first days, Carmen and Brad took care of his safety and provided everything they needed for his happy childhood. To them, Jack was the most important thing in their lives. However, with the birth of their son, serious disagreements arose in their relationship. The first misunderstandings appeared because of the upbringing of the child. The relationship between the lovers became turbulent and unstable, and after 3 years they parted, but retained joint custody of the child. The breakup was difficult for both of them, but they sincerely tried to keep a good relationship for the sake of little Jack. Wanting support and wanting to be surrounded by family, Carmen and Jack moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. Gradually, emotional balance returned to Carmen, and she began a new life without Brad. In 2008, Carmen moved with her young son to a house on a neighboring street to Brad's so that the son would be closer to his father. The young woman, who lost her father at an early age, sincerely wished that her child would always have a father around as much as she could. Despite this decision, many of Carmen's friends and family thought the couple still had a good friendship, but they only spent time together for Jack's interests. However, life went on. Carmen and Brad tried to find happiness separately again. Brad continued to work as a construction engineer, and in May 2009 he started a new relationship with a girl and even got engaged. Carmen was busy raising her son and resumed her services in the gentleman's club, which quite hurt Brad. He sincerely believed that the mother of his child should never again be interested in dubious earnings. This disagreement became a boiling point in their good relationship. With each passing day, the situation grew more heated. Carmen gave ultimatums to Brad, and he in turn simply ignored the requests of the former lover. Nevertheless, Brad entered into a new marriage and was preparing to become a father again. New financial obligations directly reflected on the alimony, which he paid under the agreement Carmen for the maintenance of Jack. The money was the last straw in a series of scandals. On March 19, 2010, neighbors called the police. The police officers arrived and responded to an incident of domestic violence. Carmen attacked Brad during another quarrel and received a warning. The relationship finally deteriorated. Arguments did not stop even at a distance. Each new question regarding Jack was perceived by each party in the bayonet and with aggression. Once loving parents for a long time could not agree on what school Jack should go to, and it again led to a number of unsolvable problems and a chain of scandals. On June 29, 2010, Brad again came to Carmen's house to make a new written agreement to pay child support and to discuss a new school for Jack. Carmen was not satisfied with the document, and she kicked Brad out of the house, yelling in the wake that Jack was not his son. Brad left. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to speak to Carmen again, but she did not make contact. On July 13, 2010, he reported Carmen Thomas missing to the police. The police took the report and began searching for the missing woman from video camera images and interviews with neighbors. Reconstructing the chronology of events since the last communication between Carmen and Brad, investigators found out some important details that should help in the search for the woman. They managed to find out that on June 29th, a surveillance camera recorded Carmen at a supermarket near her home. While inspecting the rented house where Carmen lived with Jack, the lack of a garbage can on the outside caught the attention of police. Inside the house, there were also traces of blood on the front door, on the washing machine, near the sink and shower. Forensic scientists used luminol to detect traces of blood left at the crime scene because it reacts with the iron contained in blood hemoglobin. The multiple patterns that appeared confirmed the presence of blood on the bathroom door and on the floor. The landlady told investigators that on June 29th, she heard loud screaming followed by prolonged crying and moaning. Recalling that day, she said she knocked on Carmen's door, but no one answered. She had to look out the window. She saw a street trash can and an overturned fabric horse, which is a drying rack usually made of wood or metal for drying clothes. Startled, the landlady called her husband, but while she waited for him to arrive, Brad walked out of Carmen's house and into the driveway. He was carrying soiled clothes in his hands, and upon seeing the landlady, Brad rushed to explain that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlady noticed Brad's condition. He looked like he had just taken a shower. The woman had no reason to disbelieve the man's story and did not call the police. The search continued, and Carmen's cell phone caught the attention of the police. Messages were being sent from her phone on a regular basis, but the manner of communication and tone of the messages were different and did not resemble Carmen's previous manner of communication. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. Where did the woman go if she needed medical help and why? The did not have to look for answers to these questions for long. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found. In the back seat of the car was found luggage, clothes, and other belongings of the woman. The examination of the seized suitcase on some of the things were found traces of blood. A note was also found in the car indicating that Carmen owed money to the agency where she worked. In the glove compartment was an envelope with Misty's name on it and the sum of $270. Police Inspector Mark Benefield, after finding traces of blood in Carmen's car, first raised the possibility that the woman had been murdered. Police searched the countryside southeast of downtown Auckland for the body of Carmen Thomas after a new report that her car was spotted around the time she went missing, but the search was inconclusive. The investigation and search for the woman continued. When investigators examined Carmen's and Brad's phones at the same time, they discovered both phones had been nearby the entire time they were being searched, and Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. Going forward, one of the most important pieces of evidence was the missing trash can. It remained to be seen if it could be the same bin that had disappeared from its place near the house, and that a neighbor had through her window on the day Carmen disappeared. But what did the trash can need to be inside the house for? Police did not refute the idea of the worst possible outcome and rechecked Brad's cell phone and spending by examining his bank card details and traced his shopping list. On June 30th, Brad Callahan, a meat cleaver, and a large plastic container, as well as several garbage bags. By scrutinizing Brad's daily routine, police identified some exceptional events, but did not fit into the young father's daily to-do list. It turned out that on one workday, Brad arrived at the construction site very early and walked alone around the property for a long time. It was strange, but not so strange that the workers who saw him would start reporting anyone about such an early presence of a supervisor at the construction site. Based on the evidence gathered, such as Carmen's cell phone and questionable purchases, Brad went from victim to suspect. Police believed that Brad Callahan killed his former lover by hitting her several times in the head and carefully hiding the body. On September 21st, Brad Callahan was arrested on charges of murdering Carmen Thomas and attempting to change the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty and is scheduled to stand trial. In a fateful coincidence, Brad's second son from a new lover was born at the time of his incarceration, which caused a wave of emotion and resentment in the young father who was in custody. The man broke down, and 9 days after his arrest, he pointed out to investigators the burial place of Carmen Thomas. Brad thought he had come up with the perfect plan, part of which was to make it appear that Carmen had gone to Hamilton and never returned. He was absolutely certain he had succeeded, but life made adjustments. Under questioning, he detailed the chain of events from that fateful day. After a bad conversation, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house, yelling in the wake that Jack was not his son. Brad left, but 5 minutes later, he came back into the house and hit Carmen in the head with a baseball bat with such force that she immediately fell unconscious. Blood spurted from her wound, staining the floor a bright red. Heavy breathing filled the room, and Brad stood over the body of his victim with a wild scowl in his eyes. He realized he had just done the irreparable, but he couldn't stop. In a fit of anger and resentment at Carmen's words, he threw several punches again. He knew that his act carried irreparable consequences, but everything remained in the shadow of his insane obsession. Memories flashed before Brad's eyes, happy and endless memories that were now gone forever. Brad knew that his life would be forever changed after that disastrous moment, and that he would not be able to get back everything that was, but it did not upset him at all, because by such an act he had solved his main problem, and Jack was now only his. Having come to his senses, Brad took a shower and then quietly left Carmen's house. In the days that followed, he sprang into action to get rid of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. Callahan called his friend and arranged to meet him outside the supermarket. He asked him to buy 3 black garbage bags, a bottle of kerosene and cleaning products, and waited for him outside the store, hoping to avoid suspicion. Brad then went back into the apartment and cleaned it up. He carefully wiped up the blood spatter and then wrapped the body in a bag and took it out in a trash can. In the following days, the defendant dismembered Carmen's body into 8 pieces to prepare it for disposal. He cut Carmen's legs from her torso at the hip joints. Each leg was cut through the knee into 2 pieces. Her arms and head were also severed from her torso. On July 3rd, he met a good friend at a boat ramp in Okahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He told him that he had killed Carmen during an argument and needed help disposing of the body, but an attempt to dump the remains into the sea failed due to the friend's refusal to provide a boat. Over the next few days, he drove to Waitakere Ridge in West Auckland and buried the containers in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He put a suitcase of clothes and several other bags of her personal belongings in the car to give the impression that the woman wanted to leave. But in his haste, he overlooked the fact that the suitcase also contained bloody clothes. After getting rid of the car, Brad began sending text messages from her cell phone to give the impression that Carmen was still alive. The criminal texted her friends, saying she wasn't feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. But Brad's perfect plan backfired on him. On October 1st, police went to the burial site Brad had indicated and discovered the body. Carmen Thomas's remains were found in plastic containers. They were carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Waitakere Ridge. An autopsy determined that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family for burial. On October 13th, a private funeral was held at Green Lane Christian Center for Carmen Thomas, a young mother, a cheerful, kind, and successful woman. Little Jack, who all along had waited and hoped to see and hug his mom, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, the first court hearing for Carmen Thomas took place. Judge Wenning found the crime committed was unintentional and took into account Brad's explanation that he acted on emotion. He acknowledged that it was done in a fit of rage, but Judge Wenning was less lenient when it came to the cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was newly charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A summary of the police case shows that at 8:45 a.m. on July 29, 2010, Callahan struck Mrs. Thomas several times in the head, resulting in her death. He then texted a friend to bring 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. During the ensuing period, Callahan dismembered Miss Thomas's body into 8 pieces to prepare it for disposal. On November 25, 2011, a retrial was held. Police officers who had been working on the case filled the High Court in Auckland when Bradford Callahan unexpectedly made 2 guilty pleas. Brad Callahan, who had previously denied guilt, suddenly admitted to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. The judge said it was one of the most serious cases of attempting to pervert the course of justice, calling Brad's actions just about the most serious case of attempted perversion of justice there can be. The judge also felt the murder of Carmen Thomas was brutal, but not so brutal as to result in the harshest sentencing laws. The 33-year-old man was sentenced in Auckland High Court, where a large public gallery was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents, who were visiting from South Africa. Judge Venning sentenced Brad Callahan to life imprisonment for murder and 6 years in prison for attempting to pervert the course of justice. He also condemned the lengths Callahan went to in order to cover his tracks. The sentences are to be served concurrently. Judge Venning also said the minimum sentence for the perverting the course of justice charge was insufficient to bring Brad Callahan to justice. Mr. Callahan passed judgment on himself by his actions that day, and it had a devastating effect on 2 families. said Detective Inspector Mark Benefield. Callahan's supporters left court without comment. In a statement, the Thomas family said nothing can bring their Carmen back, and they are still angry because of it. But they are grateful that Brad will be away for an extended period of time so he can reflect on the enormous damage he caused to their own son in the first place. Carmen Thomas's mother, Teresa Scott, told the court in a victim impact statement that she felt completely destroyed by what happened to her daughter. After the verdict was announced, the officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Inspector Mark Benefield, told the court that the justice done is the result of hundreds of hours of police work over the past 10 weeks since Carmen Thomas was reported missing on July 13, 2010. Also, Detective Mark Benefield, during the interview, explained what the work to find Carmen consisted of. He explained that early on in the missing person investigation, they determined that Carmen was most likely murdered. Then the work of gathering evidence, as well as researching information, was carefully conducted. This required a great deal of time and effort to gather, and it was also necessary that proper legal procedures were followed. The detective reported that over the last few weeks, close cooperation with the defendant's employer had not been finalized. Attempts to further investigate part of the Victoria Street construction site would continue in order to find any evidence that might assist the investigation. Until today, we have been unable to comment on media reports about our activities at the facility because we have been very sensitive to the issues of litigation and preemptive contempt of court, said Mark Benefield. He did not rule out the possibility of further arrests and charges in connection with Carmen's death in the near future. Brad Callahan had the courage to take responsibility for his actions in this tragic saga, and he pleaded guilty to 2 charges. But that will in no way change what he did. For the hearts of Carmen's loved ones are broken, their world shattered. Living each new day without Carmen, each of her close family members feels completely destroyed. We will never forgive him for what he did to our family, said Carmen Thomas's mother, Teresa Scott. I could forgive someone for taking a life under certain circumstances, but I can never forgive this man for being able to strip a body and hide it in containers, added her stepfather Wayne. Callahan's attorney Stuart Grieve said his client acted responsibly and does not intend to file a motion. Can a sentence with parole eligibility after 13 years and 8 months be called a ridiculous miscarriage of justice? Obviously, since New Zealand only records about 50 murders a year for the entire country, any crime that is a little out of the ordinary is covered extensively by the national media, as are the court cases for those crimes. It's possible that there was an overbearing bias against the victim at trial because of her line of work. But even if Carmen was antagonistic and pissed Brad off, we don't blame the victim for having her life taken from her, do we? If Brad had wanted sole custody of his son, he likely would have used this prejudice about Carmen's work and gotten his way because he had the opportunity. Instead, he beat her to death and tried to cover it up. In this situation, we are not diagnosing. We are only speculating. In summarizing this gruesome story, the same question comes up repeatedly. It is understandable that in a fit of rage and uncontrollable anger, a person can commit irreparable acts. But what feelings can a healthy person have when he comes up with a plan to dismember a once tenderly loved person? Little Jack Callahan is currently living in another town under an assumed name in the temporary care of his grandmother. He doesn't know that his daddy took his mom's life and must never find out because it wasn't his fault. Absurd.
On a vast site 60 miles south of Melbourne lies a landfill. As with any dump on a large plot of land, there are towering piles of domestic waste. Birds circle over the meter-high piles, while a foul smell spreads for miles around. This place is usually devoid of people. However, in May 2004, hundreds of police officers were sifting through the trash. The scene resembled something out of an apocalyptic movie, especially when investigators and police officers donned protective suits against biological hazards and ultra-durable masks to guard against asbestos-ridden dirt. The area was littered with thousands of blue trash bags. Each day of searching was incredibly challenging. They had to check every bag.
This lengthy and inevitable process significantly delayed the investigation. After 3 weeks of searching, the officers were disheartened and had exhausted their moral and physical resources. On the final day, they had one last chance to find the mother and daughter. Narelle Fraser, a young woman working in the missing persons department, had put significant effort into the search from the first day, each time apprehensively beginning the inspection of a new blue bag. Around 10 a.m. on another day of searching, an excavator pulled up another batch of bags from the depths of a massive pile of garbage for inspection. Fraser noticed a blue bag stuck at the top of the bucket. As she had done hundreds of times over the past days, she paused the search to conduct a thorough examination of the excavated trash. Climbing up the pile, the woman opened the trash bag, but seeing only a kitchen glove, she signaled to continue the search. But something was off. The investigator's intuition brought her back to the bag, and when she reopened it, she saw something else. What she had mistaken for a kitchen glove was actually a bloated, decomposing human hand. She screamed aloud. She had found them. Today, let us visit the marvelous Australia, specifically Mornington Island, where despite the beauty of the surrounding nature, mild climate, and welcoming atmosphere, a nightmare akin to a horror film occurred. In May 2004, John Sharp appeared on television pleading for help. Holding a photograph, he tearfully implored anyone with information about the disappearance of his wife and daughter to contact the police and assist in their search. As it turned out, Anna Sharp and her 18-month-old daughter Gracie had been missing from their home since March. Let's start from the beginning and figure out who is involved in the disappearance of Anna and Gracie Sharp. We'll learn where the mother and daughter went, and whether John Sharp could have really harmed his own family, or if someone else is to blame for their disappearance. Anna Kemp was born on September 27, 1962, in Dunedin, New Zealand. As an adult, she moved to Melbourne, Australia, hoping to build a career, find love, and live her best life. John Miles Sharp was born on February 28, 1967, to Valerie and Miles Sharp. The couple owned several pastry shops and lived a quiet, peaceful life in Mornington, Victoria. John grew up in a large, happy family with 4 older sisters. Later, the Sharp family welcomed another boy. John Sharp's early years were largely unremarkable. He had social issues and was heavily dependent on his parents. He had low emotional intelligence and lacked the ability to cope with stressors in his life. Sharp completed 12 grades but failed his exams. In addition to a lack of emotional intelligence and an unwillingness to face his own problems, he couldn't handle stress, so he tended to shift decisions onto others. After leaving high school, John took a job at the State Bank, where he met Anna Kemp. At the time of their meeting, Anna was 31 and John was 27. They were very different in temperament. He was always a loner and had no friends because he had been very shy since childhood and could only communicate freely with his family members. Anna, on the other hand, was cheerful, lively, and attentive to others. This greatly attracted John, and he showed her as much attention as he could afford. At first, she did not like him, but then she noticed his interest in her and saw how he opened up around her, transforming from a reserved, silent man into a confident and engaging conversationalist. Anna took notice, and the young couple began dating. In October 1994, they married. The ceremony was modest and took place in a close family circle. Anna's close relatives from New Zealand also attended the wedding, but they did not share her choice, thinking that Anna was too good for him. Decorum prevented them from voicing their opinion out loud, so the parents remained silent and supported their daughter's choice. However, during the honeymoon, Anna herself began to doubt the correctness of her choice. In a phone conversation with her mother Lila, she complained that she had rushed into it and that there was no real strong love between her and John. But being a devout Catholic, she accepted her choice and decided to try to establish good family relations with her husband and become a full family. They lived together for 7 long years in various places around the Mornington coast and appeared to be a perfectly happy family. But in reality, they lived their lives separately. By the end of 2001, Anna and John learned they were expecting a child. Anna was happy as she had long dreamed of having a child, but John was opposed, as they had agreed before marriage that they would not have children. Anna disregarded John's opinion and kept the pregnancy. Thus, in August 2002, baby Gracie Louise Sharp was born. The little girl had a difficult start to life as she was born with hip dysplasia. This is a congenital malformation of the joint that is corrected by wearing a special brace for a long time. The principle of such a brace involves bending the child's legs at the knee and hip joint and holding them in such a position. Wearing the brace around the clock creates certain discomfort for sleep and full life. Such inconveniences for the little newborn girl were very difficult during the first few months of life. It was expected that this condition would not create long-term problems for Gracie, but in infancy, she felt very uncomfortable and experienced significant distress while wearing the brace. But Anna cared for her daughter with complete dedication, hoping to remove the brace as soon as possible. The girl was very weak, ate poorly, slept little, required constant attention and care. Anna's time was entirely occupied with caring for her daughter. John was dissatisfied that his wife, Anna, devoted all her time to their daughter Gracie, and their marital relationship grew increasingly tense. However, Anna was unconcerned with John's feelings, as she was fully occupied with their daughter. Even after the removal of Gracie's brace, her sleep issues worsened, prompting Anna to seek professional help. The ordeal was exhausting for her. Anna quit her job to dedicate all her time to Gracie. The Sharp family was financially well off and wanted for nothing. In previous years, John had started a company in property staging and flipping, which allowed them to build a substantial financial cushion. In late 2003, the couple bought a house on Prince Street, close to John's parents' home. Soon after moving in, Anna surprised John with news of her second pregnancy. Anna was thrilled, as she had dreamed of having 2 children, but John was very displeased with the news and even once questioned whether the child was his. Despite their differences, their relationship appeared to be quite good. On March 21st, 2004, Anna, John, and little Gracie were invited to a family celebration. They seemed perfectly happy, and none of the attendees noticed anything unusual. But 2 days later, Anna disappeared. John behaved oddly. Perhaps each person grieves in their own way, but he did not report her missing to the police, nor did he look for her among friends and relatives, as if he knew where his wife was. And so it turned out. Sometime later, John confidently told Anna's mother in a phone conversation that she had run off with another man. He explained that he didn't know where she was or with whom. He also mentioned that Anna had taken her mobile phone with her. However, little Gracie stayed with John. This was most strange to Anna's relatives. They couldn't believe it, knowing that Gracie was neither needed nor of interest to John, and Anna would never have done such a thing. Anna's relatives never believed the story John told them. They knew Anna well enough to believe that she would never leave her Gracie, who still required constant care. On March 28th, John called her parents again and reported that Anna had come home by taxi and taken Gracie. He also stated that Anna would not return and that the child she was expecting was not his. This news completely dismayed the Kemp family. What John told them about Anna was not true to their daughter, but Anna's mother was adamant that her daughter would not leave the house, especially 20 weeks into her pregnancy. So who is John Sharp, a grief-stricken father and husband, or a participant in the disappearance of his own family? Over time, Anna's family received a letter via social media,
stating that she had moved to another city to start a new life with a new lover, and asked not to be disturbed until she was fully settled. In the letter, she wrote that she was unhappy in her marriage to John, was tired, and wanted to start over in a new relationship. But Anna's relatives knew she would never behave like that. She would call, talk, and not hide like a fugitive. Moreover, the letter was not written in Anna's style, which cast significant doubt on whether it was actually penned by her. The facts that Anna herself wasn't answering phone calls, that she was unreachable, and the strange letter, seemingly not written by Anna herself, compelled her relatives to contact the police. Following protocol, the New Zealand police called John Sharp, but were told the same story about her leaving him for another man. There were enough suspicions to report the case to the police in Mornington, Australia, who immediately contacted John. Sharp failed to convince the police that everything was fine, and they promptly referred the case to the Victoria Missing Persons Unit. Within a few hours, an investigative team was dispatched. However, the truth is not always obvious, and the police conducted a thorough check. They visited the Sharp home, where John remained alone. John cooperated with the investigation and appeared genuinely distraught and upset. He recounted how Anna, upon leaving for the first time, got into a blue car. He reported that Anna and Gracie had moved to Chelsea, They took all their belongings and are likely now happily living their new life without him. After John's testimony, the police asked to inspect the house, and he agreed without hesitation. The first floor looked completely normal. The inspection of the second floor somewhat surprised the investigators. The main bedroom lacked a mattress, and the children's room was missing a crib. John explained that he had sold the mattress, and Anna had taken the crib to their new home. The police then checked Anna's phone. The last calls were to an insurance company and one from an unknown number. In the first case, she wanted to add a new family member to the insurance. The unknown number turned out to be from a regular TV repairman. It turned out Anna had arranged for him to come and repair the television in their living room on March 24th, which had been broken for a long time. The police located this repairman, and he said that when he arrived for the job, John answered the door and told him that his services were not needed as the television was already working. The police also checked social networks, but Anna did not use them. Despite their efforts, the investigators found no evidence that Anna Sharp had another man in her life. John reported that Anna had come home for Gracie by taxi, but no taxi company confirmed this trip. A significant lead in the search for Anna Sharp was a bouquet of flowers she sent on her mother's birthday with a signed card. However, the words in the card did not seem like wishes from Anna, again causing her family to doubt that everything was all right with her. Bank statement details showed that the bouquet was indeed paid for with Anna Sharp's card. As there were no witnesses or evidence to support John's claim that Anna had gotten into a blue car on the purported day she left, nor was there any evidence of bus, plane tickets, or hotel bookings. Anna's friends had absolutely no information that could confirm the story that she had run off with another man. So, what happened to Anna Sharp and her young daughter? On June 10th, John Sharp was questioned by the police again, but he stuck to his story. After the questioning, John Sharp was released. However, this was a tactical move by the investigators as they had put John under surveillance, hoping to catch any clue that could aid in the search. John Sharp was a loner who hardly made any calls and didn't entertain guests, so the investigators had undercover police follow him. During this period, John gave a memorable TV interview in which he tearfully pleaded with Anna to contact him, holding a photograph of Gracie and crying insincerely. The surveillance team continued to tail him and one day caught him in a suspicious act. After the interview, he drove to Chelsea Beach. He walked cautiously, frequently looking over his shoulder to ensure no one was watching or following him. He approached a specific bush on the shore and pulled out a white plastic bag. Taking it, he returned to his car. There, he took a phone out of the plastic bag and made a call, then drove to the nearest ATM and withdrew cash. After that, he put everything back in the bag and buried it under the bushes on the beach. All these suspicious activities were captured on video by the surveillance team. Then, John went home and called the missing persons department,
claiming his wife had just called him and withdrawn cash from their joint account. After obtaining video evidence of Sharp disposing of incriminating evidence in a trash bin and retrieving a credit card hidden in the plastic bag, he was arrested. During initial interrogations as a suspect, John continued to repeat his story. However, he could not explain why he buried Anna's phone and her bank card. John fell silent. The detectives knew they needed to find another way to get through to him, so they invited his parents, showed them the incriminating footage of their son on Chelsea Beach, and then sent them to talk to him. An hour later, they emerged, and Sharp was ready to talk. Initially, John Sharp stuck to his story, but eventually, he confessed to the elimination with a spear gun of 41-year-old pregnant Anna Marie Kemp Sharp and 20-month-old Gracie Louise Sharp. During press conferences with John, his parents were always present. John would interrupt the conversation and leave the room. He would feel ill. He behaved unnaturally. He would roll his eyes and cry. According to him, Anna was a tyrant with a difficult character. He decided to eliminate her to save himself. An adult man ended the life of his pregnant wife because, in his view, she stood between him and his family. But beyond his confession, the police continued to look for evidence. During further searches of the house with detection dogs in the bedroom and little Gracie's room, traces of blood were found. In the trash, they found notes where John had written everything he planned to say during interrogations. A torn photo with the name Francis was also found. Anna had hoped to name their expected son Francis. In subsequent interrogations, John Sharp detailed how he had planned the end of his pregnant wife and then his young daughter. On the evening of March 23rd, the couple argued, after which Anna went to bed, but John did not. He wallowed in self-pity, believing his marriage was unhappy. It was then he decided to retrieve his spear gun from the garage. The circumstances of buying the spear gun were quite suspicious, as John Sharp had never shown any interest in spearfishing or any sport requiring such equipment. Nevertheless, he bought 2 spears for the gun using cash, leaving no trace that could prove the purchase of the weapon. While his wife slept, he loaded the gun and returned to their bedroom. John positioned the gun just inches from her left temple and fired into her skull. The shot did not instantly end Anna's life, so Sharp took the second spear and fired again. He then covered his now deceased wife with towels to avoid looking at her face, went downstairs, and slept on the couch. The next day, John Sharp woke up and went about his day as usual. He dropped his daughter Gracie off at daycare, came home, and a TV repairman visited while Anna's body still lay in the bed upstairs. After the repairman left, John tried to remove the spears stuck in his pregnant wife's head. It was a difficult task, so Sharp decided to unscrew the shafts and leave the spear tips inside Anna's skull. Then, he dug a shallow grave in the backyard and buried her, throwing her into a dirty pit. He then casually went to pick up his daughter from daycare as if nothing had happened. The deception began. John Sharp made up an elaborate story about his wife leaving him for another man and told it to his mother-in-law in New Zealand. On March 27, 2004, John put his daughter Gracie to bed. He drank several glasses of whiskey and Coke. While intoxicated, he went to the garage and loaded his shotgun with a spear he had just purchased and buried the other 2 spear tips in the backyard with his wife. He then walked over to Gracie's crib and aimed the weapon at her head. Either Sharp closed his eyes or the alcohol prevented him from aiming, but the first shot penetrated Gracie's skull but did not cut off her life. She screamed in agony as the spear slammed into her head. Then he reloaded the gun and fired 2 more shots at Gracie. Amazingly, she survived. Finally, the distraught father pulled the first spear out of Gracie's skull and fired the final fatal shot. John Sharp later admitted that the moment he ended his wife's life, he knew he had to do the same to his daughter. He even took Gracie with him to the sporting goods store to buy new spears for the shotgun. The next day, Sharp covered his daughter's face with a towel because he couldn't bear to look at her dead face and removed the spears from Gracie's head. He then wrapped her in garbage bags, secured her body with duct tape, and threw his daughter into a landfill along with her toys and the weapons he used to end her life. Then, John exhumed Anna's body and dismembered it with a chainsaw. He wrapped the body parts in trash bags and secured them with tape. He then placed them in the trunk of his car and drove to the landfill. The investigators had enough evidence for an arrest, but did they have enough to charge and convict him? There was still hope that further surveillance might lead them to the bodies. However, after several days of inactivity from John Sharp, the team decided to arrest him and bring him back to the Missing Persons Department. John Sharp's confession to the ends of his wife and daughter was just the beginning of the horror. The task of finding the bodies he dumped at the landfill like trash was daunting. Due to space constraints, bins from the Mornington city dump were transferred to another landfill. The trash bags were traced to an incident location in Tuarong, and thanks to meticulous waste management at the landfill, police were able to pinpoint an area of about 100 square meters where they believed the bodies would be found. This saved the team an immeasurable amount of time and effort. At the end of June, extensive searches began, and for the next 3 weeks, the police meticulously sifted through the trash at the landfill near Devil Bend Reservoir. Australian winter corresponds to summer months, and almost all 3 weeks were rainy and chilly. However, the search did not stop for a minute. For the police officers searching for the mother and daughter, this case became a personal mission. They ventured out in any weather and on their days off, despite the challenges of working in protective suits, masks, and the daunting environment. After 19 days, Norelle Fraser discovered a bundle containing part of Anna Sharp's body. Later, photographs of Anna's mother and other personal items were found at the landfill, likely fallen out of the bag when it tore during handling. After this long-awaited discovery, Norelle Fraser shared that she would never forget the experience of finding Anna Kemp's body. She felt as if Anna was somehow calling out to her to be found. She also confessed that the initial thrill the team felt at the first discovery quickly faded with the realization that little Gracie must be nearby. "I just held my head in my hands and cried. I cried for what Anna went through, for Anna's family, for humanity, I guess. But the thought of Gracie being there, Fraser paused. By the end of July, all bags containing the remains of Anna and Gracie were found. At the trial, John Sharp confessed to the premeditated ends of Anna Camp and Gracie. The adult man explained his act by saying his wife had been getting on his nerves. Therefore, he purchased a spear gun and practiced using it in the shed several days before the act. On the night of the act, after Anna had gone to bed, he grabbed the spear gun and fired at her head while she was asleep. He then buried her in the backyard. The next day, John Sharp went to a hardware store in Frankston and purchased a roll of duct tape, 2 polyethylene tarps, and an electric chainsaw. That same evening, after drinking heavily, he used the same spear gun to fire at his young daughter's head. Over the next few days, Sharp exhumed his wife from her shallow grave, cut her body into 3 parts, and disposed of her in the same manner as he had his daughter. He placed the body in the garbage bag and discarded it with household trash. As the charade continued, John began a thorough cleanup. He disposed of blood-stained mattresses and sent fake emails posing as Anna. He threw away Gracie's belongings and sent flowers to his mother-in-law for her birthday. In an effort to sustain his deception, John used Anna's bank card in a bank in Chelsea and even sent an email to her mother in New Zealand, pretending to be her. John Sharp appeared on television, pleading with his wife to contact him and her family to reassure them of her safety. "Anna, our marriage is over, but I still love you, and you are the mother of our wonderful daughter Gracie, whom we both adore more than anyone else." He signed a written statement to the police, claiming he had nothing to do with her disappearance. John Sharp continued to lie for 3 months. However, he was no actor, and his script did not have the ending he had planned. On August 5th, 2005, John Miles Sharp was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for the murder of his pregnant wife and child, with no chance of parole for 33 years. He is currently held in solitary confinement due to threats and assassination attempts by fellow inmates. John Sharp, dubbed the Mornington Monster, was sentenced in 2005 to 2 consecutive life terms and is considered the worst case of familicide in Victoria. Anna and Gracie were buried in Anna's hometown. The name of their unborn son, Francis, is inscribed on their shared headstone. In Gracie's documents, the father's name is now left blank. But did John really murder his wife because of their loveless marriage and his desire not to have another child, or was there another motive? In addressing his dislike for his wife and child, he could have done what many in the modern world do, divorce and move on alone, but that's what any rational person would say. John Sharp, a true monster, chose to solve his problems by ending the lives of his loved ones. Amidst all the madness that had taken over his mind, it's clear that he had lost touch with reality. There's no other explanation.